New York. I can't remember the name of it. But one of my student teachers last semester in a predominantly Black school, it's a charter school, actually it's Wessel Brooks charter school, middle school, they had to read There Again and Back Again, which is a great story about a Vietnamese family. But my student teacher had to spend so much time on background knowledge and relevancy and connectedness. And I was like, listen, as long as nobody comes in, just do the hate idea. I mean, I'm fine with just do it. Just use it because you've read it a couple of times, I think you did, and it would be more appropriate and culturally right sensitive to their students. They all make more sense. And it's not about the topic, it's about the skills. That's at least what we're trying to push. No, it's the charter school is like, no, we're going to teach this, and they don't change. They're going to change. So on high, New York comes down and says, teach this book. But in this population, it's not bad, but it's not the most appropriate. And there's
well, it's funny here, it's like, okay, obviously I wouldn't tell you see, but there was even I remember attending a seminar where they were talking about how they didn't think that To Kill a Mockingbird was really appropriate because it only presented a white girl's view of racism. And I'm like, okay. You want to stop having kids read To Kill a Mockingbird?
Actually, it's been told, but because it's racist, because it mentioned.
Yeah.
That was one of the early.
To me, that's one. Yeah, but that's to me that's.
I actually support pulling that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Not pulling it and banning it, but not having it. It shouldn't be
having it unrequired.
No, it shouldn't be required. Hey, if you want to read it, great. But I don't actually have. It's not as much about racism. It's about whether or not you're a good person. That's the main theme of that book.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But there's all these other instances that, depending upon your population, are terribly triggering to students.
Yeah.
And it does only further divide Blacks and whites. It does not bring anybody together, in my opinion. And so there's plenty of books. If you wanted to actually address racism appropriately, that's why I suggested to the student The Hate U Give, which is a modern day, does deal with race, police brutality, takes place in LA. It's kid is the adolescents are the main characters. Versus
What's the name of the book?
It's called The Hate U Give.
We are live.
Okay, welcome.
Hello. So we may want to check levels to see that they can hear you, and that maybe they can speak so we can hear them.
All right. This is Kim from ALOED. Let's see who do we have. Richard, can you hear us?
I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Perfect.
Who
Yeah,
else?
thank you for having me here.
Marilyn, I just see your name. Can you hear us?
Maybe she's not there.
Okay, and then Susan, can you hear us?
She's muted.
Unmute.
But can you hear us now?
Oh, we can't
hear you. Is she muted?
No, she just unmuted.
Susan, I thought I heard you actually. No? Say hi.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yep.
Okay, sorry, my camera is off. I'm Marilyn Flint, 1963.
Thank you, Marilyn. It's great to have you. All right.
Try again on Susan.
Susan, can you speak up just a little bit again?
The other thing to do is log back on, log off and log back on. Sometimes that helps. And we can't hear folks.
They can hear us.
I'm not even sound on my earning sound. Okay, well, why don't you go ahead and do introductions?
Again, welcome. We're so glad you're here. My name is Kim Hall. I'm president of ALOED. Typically, what I'd like to do very briefly is to go about the Zoom room and the table, introduce ourselves, class year, and yeah, that's it. Kim Hall. I graduated in 1996, and I came back and got my master's in 2001. Yeah, so it was.
Tell what you're currently doing.
Oh, I guess I'm working still. I teach down at Cal State Long Beach in their teacher education program. So I feel like I'm paying it forward every single day.
Wonderful.
I really like that. I teach methods courses for secondary and elementary, and also supervise student teachers all throughout Los Angeles. So, all right, that's me. Cindy.
Cindy Fong, class of 74. I had a career in LA Chinatown, taught there for 34 years. I love most of it.
My name is Dave Alpert. I'm class of 71. I stuck around Oxy for a year and got my teaching credential. And then I started working at LA Unified in 1972. I taught secondary social studies at a junior high for 11 years and at a high school for 26. Retired in 2009. I'm a longtime member of the ALOED board. I'm also on the board of the Oxy 50-year club.
All right.
Jack Kirkendall, class of 79. I'm a special education teacher in LAUSD. I'm going to retire in 4 years and 3 months. And well, it should be 4 months. And I've done different things. I actually was an ESL teacher in my 20s, and then I have an MBA. I was a businessman for about 20 years. And then I went back into teaching, and I also work in ICAP, which is the teacher training program. I teach classes to interns, maybe new teachers that are coming into the school system. Welcome.
My name is Anita Nelson. I'm the class of 70. I think I'm the oldest one here, probably.
But not by much.
What?
Not by much.
Okay, but. I started off in economics and then went off into medicine. I teach at Western University of Health Sciences. My strongest connection to the LA School District is my husband has also a grad. He got his master's here. Runs a foundation, and we start up STEM teams in the elementary and junior high schools. And we just have the big California state championships, and a bunch of the kids are coming off to the world competition this month. So it's really kind of exciting.
Okay, I'm Patrice Lamborn, class of 69. And after Oxy, I went to the University of Minnesota and actually ended up with a Minnesota teaching credential, which I promptly put in the file cabinet, and I owned Lamborn Travel Service for 20 years. And when I divorced, I needed a job that would give me the same schedule as my 3 children, my 3 young children, and pulled it out and dusted it off and spent 25 years supporting my children. I'm retired. Thank you. I'm so excited. I'm retired.
I'm Debbie Wagner, class of 77, got my credential here in 78, mostly retired from LA Unified. I taught elementary for many years, mostly 3rd grade, and then I became a coordinator coordinating the Title I, all the categorical programs, Title I English Learner programs. Retired in January 2017, and I've been working as a limited contract teacher, assisting with those English learner programs at my school here in Totem Way, which is walking distance from here. So yeah, I'm mostly retired.
Retirement means you get to do what you want.
Right. So KB, do you want to introduce yourself also?
I'm Kevin Brown. I'm an administrator here at Occidental. Would have been the class of 83 from the East Coast, Digging, California.
And he's our tech support.
I'm glad to have you.
Yes.
Oh, way more than text me.
And I'm Nancy Keekley. I graduated in 75. I'm a past president of ALOED, and I've sort of coordinated the book clubs over the years. I spent like 30 years, 40 years, a whole bunch of years teaching in Beverly Hills, everything from kindergarten to 8th grade. And let's have the Zoom people introduce yourselves. Should we start with, let's start with Susan. Can we hear, because I don't think we can hear you.
Susan? Okay, we can't hear you, Susan. So wave. Yeah, we still can't hear you.
You might want to log back on, log off, Susan, and try again. That might be. And Marilyn, I believe, just joined us because she just.
Yeah, Marilyn was there.
There, okay.
Earlier.
Super.
So Marilyn, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, my name is Marilyn Flint. I graduated in January 63. I started in 55 and then dropped out for a few years and came back. I'm a teacher of elementary, high school, adults, and 2 University of California campuses, Santa Barbara and Santa Cruz. And tutored preschools, so I've done pretty much the whole range of teaching. I'm retired now and working full-time on developing a curriculum that it's called Creature Teachers that uses animals to teach English and math. I've written thousands of poems and song lyrics and drawn thousands of drawings over the decades that do this teaching. And I'm hoping to find a university in Washington. I live now in Bellingham, Washington, that I can pay students project-based learning so they can help develop it and develop skills that will give them good jobs.
Excellent, thank you. And Richard.
Hi there, I'm Dick Blake, class of 1979. I married a classmate from 79, but that didn't work out afterward. I got my credential the next year, 1980. I still have the directory. I don't know why, but it's got Barack Obama's name in it. And that's why I keep that. I was picked up after student teaching at Franklin High School right there in Highland Park. I worked there for 20 years. And then I worked at Canoga Park High School for 17 years. I taught English, social studies, speech. I was a guidance counselor, a dean, and a librarian as well. I just never made it into administration after getting an administrative credential. I retired just about 6 years ago. I've done some part-time work, homeschooling, and so, but I'm looking for a part-time job. So if anybody's got any suggestions, I'm all ears. Thank you for having me here.
And Margaret. I just got to wait for you to take a bite. I think we still don't have Susan's voice though, right? Susan, you're still mute. Okay, Margaret, if I haven't given you time enough yet. Margaret's muted. Okay, it sounds like we don't have you either.
She's muted.
She's
muted. We're muted.
Okay.
There.
Sorry about that. Thanks for letting me in, Nancy. I thought I had the link in my archive and it wasn't there. Anyway, so we're giving our little mini bios.
Yes.
Okay. So I taught in Culver City for 19 years and taught in LA before that. Grade school. And mainly I was at, actually I was in Culver City for 21 years because I subbed for a while too. Mainly taught at La Bayona 2nd and 4th grade, retired in 2016. I was going to go back to sub where we live now in Beaumont, California, but when the pandemic hit, I couldn't renew my credential and I decided I don't want to have anything to do with this anyway. During the pandemic, no, I was not into virtual teaching. So now I'm president of the library board in Beaumont instead. I've switched over to that. And the library board is comprised entirely of current and retired teachers.
Not surprising.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I figured since the book was titled Of Boys and Men, we should have a man lead the discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave Albert.
Well, first of all, I'd like to welcome everybody to this discussion.
Thank you.
I think we have a lot to talk about, and I kind of was looking around the room and I'm thinking, boy, there's 8 women here and 4 men. It's kind of an illustration of what the book is talking about.
Right.
We have us outnumbered, ladies, 2 to 1, and the topic is about men. So I think this kind of illustrates exactly what Mr. Reeves was trying to bring about. So I hope everybody's read the book. I'll give you just a real brief overview of the book if there's anybody that hasn't read it. Richard Reeves is a senior scholar at the Brookings Institution currently. He was born in Peterborough, the United Kingdom. He's 53 years old. The book came out in 2022, so it's obviously very relevant.
Yeah.
He talks about the situation. I don't know about many of you, but when I first looked at the book of Boys and Men, okay, well, that seems to be kind of interesting. But it was the subtitle of the book that kind of grabbed me. And he writes, "Why the modern male is struggling, why it matters, and what to do about it." And then I kind of did a double take and I said, boy, you know, I've heard there was a problem with males, and I didn't realize that maybe it was as big as it is. And so he goes into the book, and the first couple of chapters, he talks about the male deficit in education. He talks about the job situation and how men seem to be losing more jobs than women are. He talks about the situation with Black boys and men and how they're falling behind in all different aspects. He talks about lower income people and how they seem to be being hit, lower income boys and males being hit much harder. He looks at the idea of how government policies don't seem to be working for men. When we had the feminist movement, it seemed to boost women, but some of the policies, they're either not there or they don't seem to be working. He looked at the some of these government policies. He looks also about the role of biology and culture in the raising of boys and men as opposed to women and girls. He also looks at how the political left and how the political right don't seem to have a clue about this situation, and they approach the situation or the problem from different points of view, but they don't seem to have a clue about how to solve this. And then the last part of his book, he offers some very interesting solutions. And so I'm hoping that we'll get a chance in the next 90 minutes or so to cover as much of that book as much of those topics as possible. And I'd like to start out just get everybody's impression. When you did read the subtitle, what was your reaction? As I said before, I looked at it and I thought, well, okay, I felt different pieces. I knew that there was a problem with men and boys here, and I knew a little bit about there. But to see it all put together into one book, I think he's got 242 pages. I really did a double take. And obviously, I'm retired, so I don't have to worry about employment. I'm white, so I don't have to worry about racial prejudice. I'm not probably middle income, middle class, so for that. But I think I can relate. So I just like to ask everybody, just lay this on the table. What was your initial reaction when you realized what the topic of the book was about?
Well, I cheated because I first heard him talking on NPR, and he was talking about the importance of getting more male ethnic teachers into the classroom at younger ages. And so I was saying, yes, this is a book that I need to read and we need to read. So
that part of the keel, right? As we learned up on chapter 11 or something, right? Health, education, administration. I thought that was interesting. Administration and then literacy, which it's interesting to differentiate between literacy and education, right?
I picked up on that too.
Yeah. I got two boys and a husband at home, and I thought this was going to answer a lot of questions for me because things are hard right now. Yeah, challenged. I was like, oh, good. Maybe I'll get this will give me some guidance. And lots more questions than answers.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised. There were a lot. I started to do audiobook this time, so I listened to it. Lots of statistics that we wanted, but I wasn't really surprised. But I don't see an imminent solution. You know, I mean, it's going to take some paradigm adjustments and thinking among a lot of our society to be able to really address the situation effectively, I think.
Yeah, he offers some solutions. We need to talk about those.
Yes,
they're a little controversial and things like that. So any other reaction?
I think as an elementary school teacher, most of us thought he was spot on, but the second I don't, because I don't know how many of my kindergarten colleagues have almost been, you know, I just take it for granted that the boys will have a shorter attention span, they'll act out more cognitively and emotionally. They're just not as ready as girls in the past. And I'm really intrigued by his solutions. And when we get to redshirting, among my own staff, there were 4 younger teachers, and they all redshirted their children, their boys.
Yeah.
All redshirted. And it makes sense because the boys did much better. You know, they're at the top of their class, being a little bit older and being a little bit more mature.
It's interesting because the red shirting really was an athletic term.
Yeah, right.
That you do, and parents really can see that because the difference of a year or two in a young boy's development, huge in terms of competition. So if you can be a year older competing with another 6th grader or 5th grader, you're going to have a distinct advantage. So it was interesting academically, intellectually, to do the red shirt, to allow that frontal lobe to develop. I thought that was a good solution for as he was presenting a possible thing.
Well, and when you talk about your colleagues, I mean, any kindergarten teacher with a fall boy birthday, a boy with a fall birthday, would not think twice about holding him back and having him start.
I tried to hold my son back. He's one of those late birthday boys. And they said, we'll bring him in for testing. And 20 minutes later, the guy says, he's ready for 1st grade. Okay, so he went into kindergarten. He did not go to 1st grade, but I was trying to hold him back another year. So I got blown out of the water on that one.
You tried to be a good mom.
And you have in those cases, I mean, I've seen it go both ways on that. But now we have transitional kindergarten, which is a 2-year program.
We didn't have it.
And I think that's meant to address some of this. And if the parents will buy into letting their boy spend the 2 years in kindergarten before 1st grade, yeah, I think it could be beneficial. But there's still kind of a stigma to that in some groups.
Richard wanted to say something.
First of all, I've got to say it was an easy read, and my first master's at Oxy was as a reading specialist, working with Joe Stanchfield and Ray McCormick.
Oh, yay!
The one thing is, of course, when I'm reading the book, I did a very quick read, but when I was reading it, I went into it applying it to my years in education. I saw so much of me in the book. And I was all through my young years, my teens, even into my 20s, I was immature. And I don't mean immature in terms of behavior. I never got into trouble. But I can think of, I transferred to Oxy from after 2 years at Pasadena City College. And when I came in as a junior, it just overwhelmed me. And I was immature. Now, I have parents who say, you're going to get through college in 4 years and then go on and get an advanced degree. And we're going to do it like this. I wasn't ready for it. I was not ready for it at all. And I think I should have had my higher education probably in my late 20s. I like to think I've grown up now, but you know.
Well, that does bring the point. He was talking about how you want to, quote, redshirt these kids, not so they'll be older in kinder, but so they'll be old when they hit high school.
Right.
So that
the worry that I would have is that many boys, if not all boys, would get redshirted. And there's just differences amongst everybody. And sorry for this, ladies, there's immature ladies as well. But I mean, there's so many, but there would be so many more immature. Maybe immature is not the right word, but hence the book. That's why we have the book. But I just identified with so much, when I was reading the book. When you feel like he was writing it about me, not really.
I was really surprised looking back in the late 80s, I was teaching at a school where they were deliberately hiring mainly Hispanic, but minority men at every single grade level. A kindergartner, a big Hispanic man in kindergarten, and in first, every single grade level up through 6th grade had at least one man teaching, and it was deliberate. And I wasn't even thinking on those terms at that time. And now I look back and think, wow, they were a step ahead. Really interesting.
It's ironic because when my parents split up, I lived in Los Angeles until I was 7 or 8, and then my parents split up. My mom relocated us to Alaska, and starting in 3rd grade, I had a male teacher every single year.
Yeah.
And my mom said, thank goodness, because the teacher really kind of, unbeknownst to him, and then quickly realized it was fulfilling very much a father role. And so 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, I had male. I had the only man, or one of 2 men, and the entire staff always that year, coincidentally. And then by junior high school, most of my classes were taught by men versus women. I had more men than women teachers in Alaska. And as a girl, I benefited also from having male role models. So yeah.
Good for you. That is unusual though. Yes.
It was very unusual. My mom literally Alaska. She believes that it was like divine intervention. Like thank goodness Kim fell in that year where because even my sister, who's a year younger, did not have as many men. She didn't have men teachers every year. It just like literally stars aligned for me. And it was a good thing.
Well, and it's interesting what Kim said about the fact that she benefited as a girl, but the boys probably benefited more. I was interested that Dick brought up Dr. Stanfield, because her big thing was reading interests and things that are interesting. She would say, girls will learn no matter what, but you need to target it to boys. So talk about time.
When we did that ed psych class with her, we went off to Nightingale, and everybody worked with boys. Yeah, we had 2 boys to work with
Yeah, I worked with 2 boys when I was in a different school, but yeah, I remember working with 2 boys when I had that class too.
Well, because you're working with kids who had problems, they're usually boys.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what do you think is the hindrance to men going into the teaching profession? Because part of the book was talking about getting men in fields like the Kiel ones. It's considered a feminine career? Is it?
It has been. It has been, yeah.
Issue at the very beginning of that, where there's this culture of, and even you go back to the hunter gatherer, like I gotta be the provider, and you cannot live in a lot of areas on just
Well, I remember being in my 20s, teaching, being an ESL teacher, and then I was in Japan for a long time. And when I came back to the States, my dad said, "Well, are you going to get a real job?" And he was an insurance executive, and I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "Well, you're never going to make any money as a teacher." So then I kind of, I either I was going to go to law school or I was going to go into the business world. But when in my 50s, after being in corporate America for 20 years, well, actually corporate Japan, because I worked for Japanese companies, I really just felt like I wanted to go back into teaching. And I was told by several people, you will be snapped up by, if you apply at LAUSD or one of the other districts, they'll probably snap you up because there's such a need or a demand for male teachers, particularly older ones, which is, of course, nice to hear when you're in your 50s and your employment prospects are diminished.
What year was that? What year was that? Are you talking about when you were snapped up?
About 7 years ago.
Okay, because when I came out in 1980, you couldn't get a job.
Yeah.
And it goes up and down and so forth.
Nobody could get a job.
Let me share something. I had gone through the application process and they told me you can apply for jobs. I didn't even have a teaching credential. I walked into a job fair and within 10 minutes, somebody came over and started talking to me. And then before I knew it, I was talking to one of the people in charge of the intern program, and she walked me through the steps so I could become an intern. And I was 58 years old.
That's cool.
I was just walking around.
There's a movie like that.
I had no idea. I mean, how am I going to interview for a job if I don't have a credential? The next thing I know, here.
That's here's a pathway.
But I was going to say something. This is why I think when you look at this book, you know, my father, remember, he and I talked about this. Why is it that in the military recruits men, young men that are 17, 18, 19, 20? Obviously, they're at their prime, but also they're immature, and you can mold them into killing machines, and you can send them into battle.
Right.
And that's right. And I remember reading once that when they landed in Normandy, they did not, for the most part, use the veteran troops because they knew what they were in for. They sent in the youngest, rawest troops, other than the Rangers. That was the first wave that went in at Normandy. And that kind of tells you
Those younger years don't have the critical thinking skills.
no.
And so
Right.
question the authority. And that's exactly what they wanted.
You want to turn these boys into killing machines, and you want to turn them into a cohesive unit under the command of a senior, officer, meaning 25 years old.
Right, well, they're risk takers. They also want to be heroes. They want to
And they are more, it's not going to happen to them.
Yeah.
They're not going to get STDs, she's going to get pregnant.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that what KB suggested too was saying, do men not want to go to the profession because it's a feminine profession? I was talking to a colleague who was saying that she feels like there's a lot of that among the male, the male culture not wanting. And I, on a similar vein, when I graduated from Oxy, and when it was in the middle, the beginning of women can do anything. And so when I would say, I'm going to be a teacher, it's sort of like, oh, well, why are you going to be a teacher when you could be a doctor or a lawyer or the president? So that, I felt like I had to justify the fact that I wanted to be a teacher because I wanted to be a teacher.
Well, then I think also in this culture, education and teaching does not have high status. In Japan, where I was for a long time, it's the opposite.
Yeah, right.
And I think the percentage of men is much greater, or significantly greater in education.
well, isn't that true in many other countries besides here?
Yeah.
And our status seems to be getting a little bit lower.
Yeah.
I mean, the tax and public education, the teachers, and we're in for a big teacher shortage. And my son, who's an engineer in aerospace, says, Mom, why would anybody want to go into teaching?
Yeah.
Why he said, what would you do if I told you I was going to go teach high school math? He has a master's in mechanical engineering and makes $170,000 working in aerospace. Wow.
Well, stay tuned because we just did a strike at LAUSD. We just did a strike.
Yeah.
And my support staff, the ladies that work with me, they just got a 30% raise. In fact, they're going to get 35.8% because both of them do BII support, which is the one that's on support. And now we're, and I think we've got the superintendent on the run because, well, I don't want to say what I think of him, but now it's our turn. Now we're bucking for 20%, and you're going to see an upgrading of the support staff because we are short people now. We can't. We're 5 short support staff for special ed. We're short 5 people at my school. Now I think we're going to be able to start hiring some people, and I think you may see more people go into and become teachers too.
That would be nice. I mean, I was out picketing, even though I'm mostly retired.
But it's a tough job.
Yeah.
Interesting that you say that because my older son is toying with the idea of teaching.
Yeah.
And he's actually my struggler, right? No. And there's a privilege that allows him to make that, thought process as well. I admit that. Talk about privilege a lot. But he he's seeing about how it's all done not to address him and his needs, and he feels like he could. It's not like I can do a better job, but like I could do this better than differently. Yeah. Yeah, he's thinking about it. We'll see. Who knows?
That's important because if someone has had their own struggles, they're able to better relate with someone else, and maybe they figured out a way to cope, or a way to do a way of workarounds or whatever that help them, that will help someone else.
Yeah,
and that's wonderful.
So he in his senior year is going to be a peer mentor for his high school, which means he's going to be he'll have an advisory group along with a faculty member. And he was filling out the application for this program, and he says, it asked, what am I going to offer, my advisees? I said, honey, people that are struggling don't want to hear from the person that doesn't struggle how to study. They need to hear from you that is constantly challenged by how to always get my work turned in on time, how to finish it, because you actually have a ton of coping mechanisms and strategies. They're not necessarily named. I said, but they will actually like to listen to you.
That's what they need.
Versus somebody who, the straight A student that, doesn't have quote academic challenges. You're like, really, Cindy? You're not helping.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see. Like I said, he could flip again. He is just 17, so he's got a lot of growth. So
Interesting.
So I think, Patrice, a lot of it has to do with he sat on my shoulder during COVID and watched me teach.
Okay.
And very much enjoyed that, and I actually ended up befriending a couple of my students, and still keeps in touch with them. And that was one of those silver linings. Wasn't there an article that just came out about all the silver linings of COVID? And among others, that was one of them, was an appreciation for what mom does, because mom typically is down at Cal State Long Beach, where they don't see what I do or how I, whatever. Yeah, I think it's good.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of, when COVID hit, I think there was a lot of parents that didn't realize the tough job that teachers do.
Yes.
Because they were sitting there and then watching over your shoulder as you were teaching, and watching over their child's shoulder while you were teaching. And so I think in a sense that would be a silver lining from this pandemic, if we can find any silver linings. But that certainly was one. Just one full disclosure from me. My wife and I do not have any kids, so I don't relate to some of you that are parents. I started teaching in 1972, which happened to be the year that Title IX was passed. And I started as a teacher, and I think people kind of look like, as a man and teaching, you're not going to make any money. But luckily, my wife, who I think probably took advantage of Title IX, she made a lot more money than I did in the private business, private industry. She was in the home building industry. So again, Reeve talks about how everything for women seems to change with Title IX. And I'm certainly one person that took advantage of that. So I could be a teacher and not make much money, but still as a male, I think, as I taught secondary school. So what I'd like to look at next is one of you, I think, mentioned about how many statistics Reeves includes in this book. And that blew me away. I mean, every page he had a poll, or he had a chart. And I was just amazed at that. I think you mentioned that you had the book on Kindle or something, and you finished it. Oh. And it was, they only showed it 64% through the book. So I actually did some math. The book is 242 pages. Which works out 185 of that was text, which is about 76% of the book. The notes were about 20% of the book was the notes, and the index, which is normally pretty large, was only about 4%. So my question to everybody is: was there any particular poll or chart or anything that really grabbed you And the one that I kind of focused on, because I was a secondary school teacher, was the number of males and females teaching middle school, which is where I started. And then in high school, secondary school, it's a little bit higher. And then upper post-secondary education has the most of it. So that was the one statistic that I think kind of caught my eye because I was involved with it. Was there anything that any of you, one thing in particular that kind of grabbed you?
Well, if I may ask, what was the page number that you meant that chart? Do you know it offhand?
The numbers of pages, or
no, the graph that you just mentioned.
It was in the one. Oh boy.
Because you're right.
Chapter 10.
Okay.
That's
okay.
What I can find it was the first chart in chapter 10. Sure. And he had a chart, and also the interesting thing was, and maybe I read this wrong, but on the previous page, he mentioned something I thought that said.
It was 10-1.
10-1, okay. Now the previous page,
yeah,
now at the bottom, I think he mentioned something like, well, the number of males seemed to decline.
Yeah.
As they went through from elementary to middle, and then, but his chart shows something different. So I don't know if that was an editing error or I misread that or what, but that did grab me. The chart is what I was kind of zeroed in on.
I was surprised.
If you look at it, it says that it declined over time. That was the point we were making there.
Over time, okay, because in this chart, he shows that there's more and more men. So maybe it's went on. Okay.
They're saying that all of the levels drop.
Right, as time
goes on.
Okay, I missed.
Just like all of them, remember we talked a couple of weeks, caught on in the line, it's become more liberal and there's more conservatives teaching anymore, right? That's
there were a couple for me. One is the chart that shows now white women now earn more than black men. And then the other one was that for every job in STEM, there's going to be 3 jobs in HEAL. I think HEAL was actually created. But that weighs towards women because they're more inclined to go to HEAL.
Yeah.
Yes, I do think
the needle's moving.
Maybe,
I think I don't have any, I listened to it, so I don't have any of the graphs in my head, but I did hear all the statistics. And I had to take a statistics class because I didn't take math at Aussie. And I just remember about statistics is, depending upon what the statistics numbers say, you can read it anywhere you want. You can interpret it, right? You can change before right? Statistic. And so I had to always remind myself, because he said it a couple of times. I felt like when you listen to it, right, he's speaking right at you. And I felt like I was many times being told, this is going to sound like I don't care about women, but I really don't. And I know all these statistics are going to sound like women's lives are better than they are. And we know that they still aren't. So I felt like I had to constantly remind myself to just listen to a statistic and listen to his interpretation of it, because my gut reaction was to hear a statistic and say, yeah, we're still not doing very well as a woman, right? And then I just had to constantly remind myself that the mother of 2 boys, that's not a good number.
Well, I'm a Sputnik baby. Maybe you can.
Oh wow.
That also, when I got into high school, all of us girls were pushed into STEM, and it wasn't called that. It was just you're going to do math and you're going to do science. You can do all these things. When I was in high school, and my family, my mother, father, 2 aunts, 3 uncles were all teachers. And so I was pushed into the STEM, and I said, I'm not going to be a teacher because I'm going to do all these other things. Well, I ended up in business instead. But looking now at my children, they're teachers. Well, my son's kind of teaching, but my daughters both went back. They said, well, grandma and grandpa were teachers. And so it's really interesting to see what the school did in pushing the STEM, because they really did, and they signed us up for those classes and pushed us out. But then my parents, when I was pushed out of high school, you know, with all this STEM stuff, my parents said, we will pay for your college if you get a teaching credential. So I went to college and took all the courses and got the teaching credential because that's how they paid for, that's how I got it paid for. And I put it in the file cabinet because I wasn't going to teach. But it was the most wonderful insurance policy when I divorced after 18 years and had 3 little kids, that I could pull that back out and say, I'm going to get health coverage and dental coverage, and I'll be off every holiday and summer. So, you know, it was valuable to me, but I've been pushed into STEM by the counselors and by the teachers in middle school and high school. So I could see the influence that those teachers had. So we need to be looking at the teachers influencing the men and the boys and encouraging them into heal and say, you can do these things, and see how that kind of influence can help.
Because they're saying that same influence again on girls in STEM is making a difference. So you're right, if teachers and schools start pushing boys into the heal professions, maybe that would.
They need to see role models in those missions. That's one of those things they said that, and I can't remember if it was in the book or if it was in that little YouTube thing that little YouTube link. Jackson. When they see people in commercials and on TV shows and the movies and stuff in those positions, playing in the men in those roles, it inspires them. Oh yeah, I could do that. And that kind of thing. I also think STEM is great, but I think we've overemphasized STEM in many ways to the detriment of having that hands-on or technical, vocational trade schools. We need to, it is starting to come back, but it needs to come back more. Do you know how hard it is to find a decent mechanic? I'm serious. Cars are computers now. And
we need a STEM education.
We have to be a car mechanic. We've discounted the trades for years. My husband's a journeyman carpenter. He went to an apprenticeship and he became, and he's a craftsman. And that's discounted now, and it shouldn't be. And we need to get back to.
You even are beginning to see that as a, even the Biden administration is trying to create an industrial policy that puts more emphasis on manufacturing, American made, and on those kinds of programs, educational programs, in order to revitalize that.
We need to, to expand our, I would say expand our community college system as well. The 2-year.
Well,
did anybody understand his argument in favor of freestanding trade schools as opposed to integrating them into the routine schools? I didn't quite see what the push was there. He was really much more.
Was that one of the recommendations at the end?
Or trade schools.
More independent schools, because when they are filtered into the existing schools, they're watered down. There's just not enough of them. Whereas I think he's looking at the European, especially the German model. When they have that split once you finish middle school, that there is a long tradition of apprenticeship, which is something Biden was addressing in his latest bill. Very strong apprenticeship system, and also great respect for trade schools.
Which it doesn't.
That's why he wants them independent, because he thinks that they are their own entity. They'll get the funding, more funding and support.
It's interesting. My husband went to a high school in Portland called Benson, and it was a combination trade school and the best going on to college. And the kids had to take and so my husband took shop. And he took all of those. I never needed to call a workman for anything because he could fix it all. But he is math and Caltech, okay? But it was that integration of those two together that was really the richness. So if they had been siloed, I wonder.
But it sounds like that may have been the exception, because to Cindy's point, when you water it down, when you have kids going to a school where the academic side is considered higher.
Oh, yeah.
Versus the trade hands-on side.
But that's what we have to change.
That's what we have to change, right?
Right.
That's what it seems
Absolutely.
like.
Well, and the
I think
Germans were very smart about it because beginning in the 80s, when manufacturing really started to get hammered in the United States, and the United States lost a lot of its manufacturing expertise, and all those jobs started to go overseas. The Germans said, no, 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 we're going to keep our manufacturing. And so they made it, well, of course, it was West Germany in those days, but they created an industrial policy that allowed them to maintain a much more significant percentage of their workforce in manufacturing. Or
import workers to do it.
yeah, good union high-paying jobs.
Yeah.
Richard and Mary, I know that you both have your hands up, and also I want to recognize Joyce. Do you want to unmute yourself? We just noticed you joined us. We're so glad you're here. No, Joyce. All right. So then, Richard, you had something to say, and then Marilyn.
When I started 1981, LA Unified High School, you had auto shop, metal shop, wood shop, home economics, which was cooking, sewing, and childcare.
Yeah.
And then we get to, what was it, 2000, 2005, those leave the campuses. And then the home ec classes became special ed, classrooms became special ed class, and they were just suddenly gone. And the whole idea, I mean, Canoga Park High School, we had to put on a bulletin board, think college. We're going to get everybody into college. And it's just like the pendulum totally swung the other way. But I remember my days as a guidance counselor, we were, and this is in the 95, 96, you were told, you worked with a student in the, as we called them then, junior highs, now middle schools, but you would determine, is this student going to go on the track for college, or is he going to go into, you know, one of the shops, or I'm looking for the right word, vocational school. And I don't know, as a counselor, I tried to make the student decide for himself and with parent backing, but like I said, the pendulum went the other way. And I remember my last years, we're going to get every student into college.
Marilyn, go ahead.
Yes, I have a friend who graduated in '56, and he had drafting and all different kinds of shops and went straight from high school to a job at Boeing in 1956 that paid $50,000 a year. And in those days, when my age and his age were going to school, there was all kinds of things like that. And I want to propose a very unusual situation. I was one time in a flood, and all the people of the community came together. It didn't matter if we were male or female, what religion we were, what race we were, what social class we were. We were all together filling sandbags and stopping the flood. And I think that's very symbolic of what is happening right now. And if we could just stop making a big deal of gender and race and religion and all these differences that we think are so important, and realize that just like with this flood, we would have been wiped out. We need to see what is happening to the dangerous situation in the earth and stop making such a big deal of gender along with all these other differences. And then we wouldn't have such a gender problem. And it takes both parents and teachers working together to be able to do that. Now, I'm sure some will dismiss me as saying, oh, you're so unrealistic. But my college students love the idea. Graduate students in religious studies, they love the idea of setting aside all our religious differences and planning together, how do we be the kind of people the world needs to make it better, no matter what our differences is. They loved it.
Marilyn, that's very well said. That's great. Yes. You need your hand up too. Margaret, go ahead. Make sure you unmute.
I agree with it.
There you go.
Okay. I just want to go back to the idea of trade school, the importance of trade schools and having a career that doesn't involve a four-year college degree or even an associate's degree necessarily. My daughter, I have two daughters. One of them has a master's in writing and married somebody else with a master's in computer science. And she is now a stay-at-home mom, but she has worked as a professional writer for SpaceX and for other companies, you know, high-profile job. Now she's a stay-at-home mom. My younger daughter has a degree in science, and she met this guy, her boyfriend, who graduated from high school, and that was it. So half my family hates him because he doesn't have a college degree.
Oh.
And that is so ridiculous. I mean, right now he's finishing his EMT training, and he's also a skilled glass artisan. He's been supporting himself doing glass art since he was 18. He went through a training program, you know, he had a mentor and everything. And he has been financially independent from his millionaire mom since he was 18. And to me, that's more important than having a college degree. But there are certain members of my family who will not accept this guy because he doesn't have a four-year degree.
That's sad.
I mean, they don't even know him. They just put him in the category dumb. And that drives me nuts. I used to head a scholarship committee, and I had to really push for giving scholarships to high school kids who were not planning to go to college, but who wanted to go into a training program of some kind or do an apprenticeship. And I ran into opposition there too, a little bit, but you know, they finally saw that there was some validity in that, especially because I started giving scholarships to kids who were at the continuation schools, not just the high schools, kids who were kicked out of high school. One of my daughters had to be taken out of high school, our decision. High school isn't for everybody either.
Yeah.
You know, some people have learning disabilities or they're weird or whatever, and they get picked on. So it's people, I mean, society has these very rigid views of what people should do to be successful. And ultimately it hurts us all.
One of the things that I taught high school starting in 1982 with the LA Unified. I taught in Huntington Park, which was a predominantly Hispanic community. I saw a statistic that like 92% of the parents had only gone through the third grade. And so when the district started to put this emphasis on going to college, they had to meet the Cal State and UC standards to graduate from high school. We started losing some of our males because they would drop out. I taught juniors and seniors, and they would start to drop out and say, you know, Mr. Alfred, I can't, you know, meet these standards, and my family needs me to work. And there was no really the trade schools that we had, the shops that we had were kind of being phased out. And then the other problem was, which kind of goes against what the book was, the Hispanic culture did not push women to go to college. And a lot of the traditional Hispanic families said, no, my daughter's not going to college. If she gets through high school, which was a push, then she's going to get married and have kids. And so it was a tough situation to face because I saw a lot of opportunity in these kids. And a lot of times kids would come to me and say, Mr. Albert, would you talk to my mom and dad and tell them I think I can go to college, but they won't let me. They are not going to let me go. So it was kind of a battle. And like I said, for the women, it's opposite of what Reeves talks about. But it was true. The loss of these trade schools for that community was really a blow.
It seems like
you are so right.
Seems like the colleges are trying to step up and fill in a lot of that. I know we walk around West LA College every morning. They've got the aviation training school and they've got the dental hygienist training school. And so they're trying to move into that area a lot more than they used to.
El Camino shut down its tool and die class, which was pathetic. You need to have skills.
Yeah.
Well, I have to back that up. The thought, when I started teaching in the 80s, right near Franklin High School in Highland Park, many young ladies, it was I want to graduate, get married, and have kids right away. And then when I retired in 2017, the years before that, the young ladies were not talking about getting married. They were talking more about careers. I would even, in social studies classes, I would ask, how many of you are interested in going into the military? And very often the ones who raised hands would be half women.
Yeah.
And so I saw a huge change in that one. And personally, I think it's wonderful that, you know, marriage is not first and foremost on young ladies' minds.
Well, when I think about how American society has evolved over the years, and this question of what's happening with men and boys, I think you can also say, in a sense, what's happening to the white population overall. What you had was a society that was dominated. White supremacy was a fundamental principle that drove the creation of this country, along with very rigid gender roles, and then also you know, originally the Protestants were the dominant, and then that's gradually expanded to include Catholics and others. But the country's come a long ways towards expanding its notion of the in-group, so to speak, or those who are given opportunity. But we're at the point now where, because of civil rights and the women's movement and the gay movement and so on, where the traditional social system has broken down. But there's been a lot of emphasis on liberating women and including minorities and and allowing gay people, that whole community, to have equal rights. That I think that, you know, white people and men and straight people who tend to adhere to the traditional roles are kind of at a loss as to what they do next, right? And they're frightened.
They're scared.
Yeah, they're frightened.
They're scared.
They're standing their position. They don't know what to do.
And I hear this from a lot of my old friends, from like my men friends from like high school, who the idea of genuine equality to them is a kind of repression.
It's a serious game.
It's a long time. If you take away my portion, if you give me a smaller pie piece, right? Think of it in a pie.
It's a zero-sum game. We haven't created an ideology, a vision of the country where we see the engagement of all people as a synergy that builds and all can prosper. It's always somebody's got to lose in order for somebody else to gain. And until that mindset is broken, then we're gonna have this struggle. And I think a lot of what drives, particularly on the political right, is basically fear of what's coming next.
Exactly what you just said.
Did you notice how we skipped over the fact that Dave is a confident enough person that he was perfectly happy to have his wife be the main financial provider? Yeah. I mean, that's an attitude that
I was going to ask him how he pulled that off.
You could see it. You know, a lot of them. A friend of ours just wrote a biography of his life, and he kept talking about how his role was to be the provider for his family, and he said that like 5 times. And I was thinking,
that's so sad.
So that's probably what he was raised with.
Yeah,
that was the expectation he was growing up.
But he's
well, particularly for baby boomer men who, like Oxy, your typical Oxy guy from the 70s or 80s, it's very confusing because we do want to, we knew we had to change, but how are we going to do that? And what was our new, what was going to come for us next? And I think that also ties into teaching too, because, as a teacher, you have to be empathetic, right? That's not the traditional male.
Well, I would say you have to be sympathetic. I don't think we can be empathetic.
Yeah, well,
Right.
sympathetic also. Yeah, that's not the tradition, that's not the role model of the male that we were raised with, right?
Amen.
That's why teaching was women's work, right?
Right.
Well, I guess my problem with this, and I'm on a different, not answering any of your questions, but I think when we're looking at some of the fundamental problem that we have in finding roles for men and women, right? He alludes to a couple of times the fact that there's such an overlap, right?
Yes, now
That the individuals differ, that's right.
And I think that may be a key, that rather than trying to dichotomize and find a role for men and a role for women.
It's like a spectrum, right?
Exactly, it's a continuum, it's a spectrum. And if we can just approach the problem at the individual level, is the kid school ready? My kids should have been, I have 2 boys, should have been promoted. I mean, we wasted a whole year of school, right? Other kids definitely need more time. And why it is we have to have stereotypes, why we have to have some sort of mechanical motion going forward, that it's a shame that if a kid fails, is it his failure or is it because he wasn't ready, we didn't give him the skills, he needs more time, right? If we can just kind of approach the issues that way, but really, and you guys are on the front lines, and whether this is feasible, you mentioned was your child school ready, right? And getting overruled on that, but at least somebody did the assessment and maybe the tool wasn't right. You didn't feel comfortable. But I think that is just such a much more productive. And if there isn't a male model, then there isn't something you have to keep searching for, right? If you're comfortable contributing as a nurse, if you are really good as a teacher, if you want to be an engineer, you know, clearly we need to keep some idea of gender, but it shouldn't be driven, you know, the driving force that you have to define yourself as a woman first, and I'm a woman who is, you know, in this role. I think it's important, partly because we can see some of the rolling back, and maybe that's too gentle a term, but when I see what's happening in Afghanistan, and I see what's happening in Iran, and you look to see what's happening to women as a role, you have to have that line in the sand. But can we, in the environment where we have this potential to be partners, to work together and contribute whatever our strengths are? You know, you may be much more empathetic, but maybe not because you're a woman, but because whatever those things were together would be something you could bring to it. And if your son has faced some of those issues, what a gift to bring to kids, right? But at the core, it's as an individual or as a human, right?
When I was stuck in traffic driving over here today, I had National Public Radio on, and it was Good Food with Evan Clyde. Okay, and her guest was from Melbourne, Australia, who had gone to see a car race when she was 13 and was struck by the power of the engines of Formula One racing. So she became an aeronautical engineer because this was her passion and so forth. And somewhere along about 28, 30 years old, she realized she really wanted to be a baker and just completely flipped over and opened a bakery in Melbourne, Australia, and which is about as far away from aeronautical engineering and Formula One racing as you can get. But she followed at that point her passion and was able to give in and say, okay, I'm not going to do these things that I had planned and thought I was going to do, but now I'm going to do what my heart wants me to do. And we need to give people permission to do that, rather than saying,
being pushed into it.
It being pushed in.
We need a menu.
Yes, and you guys make a good point. It's like for years we've been encouraging girls to go for what you want to do, but we haven't been giving boys permission to go to some of those other field type vocations, or you know, I think that's where the shift needs to be.
Well, there's no model for them to do that. That's you know,
as I was driving,
been so much on the liberating
Right.
Did you hear that?
I was talking to my sister and.
I've got to ask the question. Was the lady happier when she became a baker?
What?
Was she a lot happier when she opened the bakery?
Yes, absolutely.
I think that's what matters.
Yeah, and that's what she was saying on this radio program, was that because now she's, doing what her heart wants. Exactly. The money isn't the objective.
Yeah.
Well, I think there is a new paradigm that's emerging in the notion of a spectrum. I see it in special education. I've worked a lot with kids with autism, and autism is now regarded as a spectrum. So like Asperger's syndrome is not considered a separate disability. It's just a different location on the spectrum. I think that you can view intelligence in the same ways, that there's different kinds of intelligence. And, a lot of boys are good with their hands. They're not that intellectually inclined. And when when kids are being pushed to go to college, there's a lot of boys, that's not the right place for them to go. Or they should go to a trade school, right? Sexuality is the same thing. Why is it that the far right is now going after transgender people? Right? Why is that happening? Why are they targeting these people and turning that into
fear? You said it.
Fear. And it's an easy target.
It's easy target. They're different.
Yeah.
Although we were having a conversation.
Can I answer that?
I know you have something to say, but my husband was saying, why are there so many more transgender people? And I was saying, maybe it's because people are confused about their gender roles. And so it's,
maybe it's because they're not being acknowledged. They were there before.
They're always there.
Oh, can I speak to that?
Isabel.
Yes. But a friend of mine who works at the high school was saying, looking around at the population of the high school, she has a hard time distinguishing between girls and boys in the vast majority of the kids in the high school. And so maybe the generation coming up is going to change a lot of things.
I don't think they have a hard time differentiating themselves with their gender. They don't care. It's not even that they care, they just don't see it as a dichotomy.
Right.
Gender fluidity.
Let's speak to that.
I know what that means.
And I think they also recognize just how stereotypical gendering is. And they actually are more astute. Boys and girls are more astute, more understanding in general, more accepting,
more comfortable
of what is not maybe there.
Well, think of the racial categories, like in LAUSD, you have these boxes, are you white, are you Caucasian, now there's
check all that apply.
Yeah, now there's so many boxes, right? Because think about it, is this, people from all these different parts of the world, all these different ethnicities and quote unquote racial categories are mixing now to the point where, you could have a grandmother who's Filipino and a grandfather who's Chinese on one side, and then you have Irish and German, and by the time they get to you, you've got 7 or 8 boxes.
Well, the census is probably good like that, right?
Yeah.
You can check more than one.
So eventually, I don't know what LA is, they're gonna have to create a whole different, page for all of the different.
Or make it a short answer. Okay.
Can I speak to that?
We're all really guilty of interrupting things. So we're gonna have Anita, who's been interrupted 8 times. And we see you, Dick. We know that you have something.
Okay, thank you.
Anita first.
No, I just wanted to follow up on a thought. As I was traveling over, I was calling my sister and talking to her about something I've done with AAW. She said, what's that? And then I was talking about this book, and she said, well, the seroptimists are busy supporting young girls coming up. AUW is doing this, the science track, all these things. She said, where are the men helping young men?
Yeah.
The Boy Scouts is gone.
No, it isn't. It's
No,
but it's
I'm very active in that. So
Okay, very active.
It's big support, right? The role models. Where are the men and the men's groups coming out to help young men? If there is a need for a role model type of thing, integrating into everyday, I think absolutely. And that's why I didn't bring it up as part of this, because I don't think it should have that kind of, but whether there wants to be a search for what can I be when I grow up?
Yeah.
Are there enabling groups? We as women could certainly form.
Aren't you gonna eat lunch?
I had lunch. Okay, Dick, you wanted to say something.
I got to go back to the idea of the far right and dealing with transgender. There's two things going on there. Number one, you do have people on the far right who it's a religious thing. God gave me this body.
And running out.
Hey, somebody talk? Okay. God gave you this body. You have to accept that, but that's not everybody on the far right. The other notion is if somebody's going to go from being a woman to a man or a man to a woman, it shouldn't be done school age. People should wait, they should wait till they're 18 or they're 20. And I have to say, I support that because those of us who taught well, I think all students, kids change their minds about everything. And I have seen people, I've seen two young ladies interviewed who started going through the transgender process. And then they got to a point and they said, look, I don't want to do that anymore. But they had started, there was one, she had her breasts removed, but then decided, I want to be a woman after all. And then was told she'd never be able to breastfeed. She may not be able to have children. So I'm, like I said, I'm all for the transfer, but I shouldn't be done with kids.
Well, we do have tools now where we can suspend puberty. But if you make them go through puberty and wait until they're 20, they may not get the same results and they may have been damaged terribly.
Yeah.
Or the ones where you saw the little, I worked at an elementary school, you saw the little boy come in kindergarten and he was always playing in the house. He was always putting the dresses on. And by 4th grade, he's out behind the backstop putting on makeup with all the little girls. And then you get the police report that he was beaten by his dad. And that's heartbreaking to me.
Yeah.
To watch that, because he was bright, he was cheerful, he was capable, he had all this going on, but
in the wrong body.
He was in the wrong body, and and his father would not accept that and beat him up. I lost track, so I don't even know whether he's still alive. And that's sad because he had potential for all kinds of good things that he could do.
Or a friend's kid who, after his 3rd suicide attempt before going into 8th grade, they decided that was the time. After the 3rd suicide attempt. Marilyn? You have to unmute yourself, Marilyn.
Well, you get that? You know, it's interesting because the book is, I think, really is talking about how there has to be a cultural change outside of education, outside of industries, because you still have young boys being told, ignore your feelings, don't cry, do not do things that have to do with emotion. So when we talk about what you're passionate about, young boys aren't allowed to do that.
No.
Right? You're allowed to where you are. Right. You're pretty much set in what you want to do. And it's something we had said earlier. There's now minority rule is what we're headed towards. And as someone said, this fear of white America becoming a minority, which every statistician will tell you it's happening.
It's happening.
Right? It's happening. And someone said, what, do we treat minorities badly or something? Like, that's what they're afraid of, is that they're going to be treated as badly as they have treated minorities. And there was a wonderful moment in some protest during the George Floyd thing where this young Black woman was saying, we don't want revenge. We just want equality. Right? So the fear that there's going to be something terrible done, it's like, it's still, even if it's a minority, it's still the most powerful political influence in America. And so how do you convince people, relax? Yes, you're becoming a minority, but you're still going to be in power.
Well,
right?
Well, the good news though, is that these arguments have been used over and over and over again for women getting the right to vote, for abolishing slavery.
Yes.
So it's you know, I can remember, you know, when, you know, Kennedy was a Catholic and the Pope's going to tell him what to do. Well, actually, Kennedy wasn't a very good Catholic, so I don't know.
But it was a big deal. It was a big deal.
Yeah. Right. So we've been through this before.
Yeah.
Maybe not as extreme now as it is, you know,
Right.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, to me, the big focal point of making cultural change is going to have to start with the churches that we have that are forcing their congregations into this male-dominated patriarchal, and so that's where it's going to have to start. And they are the ones that are the most resistant to it. So it's going to be a tough sell to get that kind of buy-in to equality because they don't want equality.
But I think things like the Kiwanis Club, you know, when I remember when I was a kid, my dad was a member of the club. And then about 15 years ago, I joined the Kiwanis Club when I was living in Rancho Cucamonga, and it had completely transformed because it had become
now women.
Yeah, well, they ran the club. So, and I think that's one of the reasons men have been resistant is they know once women get in, they
Okay, time out. Because Marilyn is now unmuted and Cindy's been waiting patiently.
Yeah. Cindy, and then those of us talk will keep talking.
Okay, Marilyn, go.
Okay, my granddaughter became my grandson this winter when she went away to college, and she has never been so happy. And I am so glad she was born into this family that gives her the right to make her own choices and not judge her. Other than a couple of cousins who are extremely conservative and they let their church leaders dictate to them what to think in every detail. She is a whole different person. She was always tense and nervous and froze when you gave her a hug, and now he is peaceful and happy and glows and gives real hugs and is found what he needs to be.
Good.
That's wonderful.
It's wonderful.
That's a great, so thank you for sharing that.
Right.
Cindy,
All I want to say is that I'm sitting next to Dave and he has 7 pages of notes. But we really need to, but Dave, is there something overwhelming that you, from those notes that you want to present to the group? Because he's got a lot of memory.
we totally
And
have
he's
you.
just such a
I took notes.
facilitator that he's
Jack,
No, seriously, seriously.
Well, this has been a pleasure. I don't have to do much because I think the book speaks for itself. Just a couple of things that I wanted to bring up. One of the things I don't think we've addressed, KB, you kind of in a sense, but one of the things that Reeves talks about is that men and boys are kind of getting the short end of the stick, but Black men and boys seem to be getting it even worse. And low income, not even race, seem to be getting it worse. So I'm wondering how people are perceiving as a group that, and what do we do about it?
You guys in LA school district on the front line.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's going on?
Well, I think we need to approach the idea of modeling and equity. That we have all these special programs in the last 30 years,
Right.
So that the female in America can catch up. We need to, again, budget and finance model programs for boys. All these programs for women aren't working for the boys. I mean, he makes that really clear that there's third of his book.
And
you know,
even when they're
negligible. Even remember the example of the benefactor in one city who's paid for any college education throughout the state. For the women, it's wonderful. For the girls, for the boys, it was like nothing, absolutely nothing. So I think, you know, we have to, in our own way, and also as voters, work towards making some of these programs possible. And the intersection between being poor and being Black, you can't separate that, because many of those households are single parent. They talked about how Black women, it's the least married group of all groups in America, because I still remember that line, because having a Black husband is just another mouth to feed. Remember that term?
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know, that's intractable. When I was here at Oxy in the 70s, I was studying urban studies. You know, there's already, you know, they've spent 10 years before that trying to figure out and unravel that Gordian knot. So I don't know. I don't know what you can do about that. And then holding up model minorities like Asians, what you don't realize is there are Asian minorities who are also at the lowest socioeconomic, you know.
There's a spectrum again.
Absolutely. It depends on the ability to reorient rather than integrate into society, and the strength of family and how much personal trauma these families or cultures come to America.
Or find once they're here.
I'd like to share something that it deeply affected me growing up. Both of my parents were educators. And what I would get from the Black community when I was in school was that I talked white and that I needed to talk in a more vernacular way. And it's interesting because then I had a friend who was a teacher who said, now, and this is nowadays, the 90s or 2000s, said, it's changed from you talk white. It's the smart Black kids are told A's and B's are white grades. And that you're not supposed to do that. You're trying to be white if you are trying to do your best academically. And there's been a change because my parents' and grandparents' generation, you know, my grandparents sent 4 Black women to college in the 40s and 50s, right? So they absolutely understood the importance of education. That has changed culturally here, and that education is not thought of as your way out. Have some athletes saying that to students, like you'll go to a group of students, you know, how are you going to get out of here? I'm going to become a pro basketball player. I'm going to become a pro baseball player. How many of you are thinking about becoming a doctor, or a lawyer, or a teacher, or an accountant, or something that is good money? So I think culturally within the Black culture, there needs to be a re-emphasis on the importance of education, whether it's trade schools or whether it's not, but that still is an obstacle that needs to be changed within the Black community. There's just, I don't know the reason why, but it is just the way it is now, and it's unfortunate, but it's a.
Is it a reaction because the Black community has not been able to succeed for several generations? That they, because of public inequality in public schools, therefore, you cannot aspire to something if you don't think you can get it.
True. And Bill Russell pointed out, you know, the idea of separate but equal was never came to fruition, right? So it wasn't that Black kids wanted to go to school with white kids. They just wanted good education, good books, good teachers, good classrooms. And so instead of doing that, our culture said, well, we'll then send you to these other schools, which wasn't necessarily what the Black community wanted. But to your point, Cindy, I don't know. I'm not sure, you know, what.
There's a great Malcolm Gladwell episode on the adverse effects, particularly in Black education, of separate but equal. So after Brown versus the Board of Education, and we said everything's going to be equal now, there was this huge crop of Black teachers who, because everything got desegregated, fell to the bottom of the pool because they hadn't either been in long enough or whatever. So as a result, of trying to give everybody the same, there is this huge crop of Black teachers, which is right. We got to have models of people like us that we see every day doing what we want to do to aspire to, and they're not. They drop.
Right. Historically, Black colleges have made a resurgence because they recognize the importance of Black students going to a place where they are the majority, and they don't have that experience as a minority. And it's kind of similar to like women's colleges started to evolve there, that people realize, no, women really do excel when they're in an environment where they're encouraged to be really outgoing, really smart, really versus kind of shying away in a class where there's, more men and they're trying to kind of affect themselves. So I'm hoping that that's a direction that we're going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because there aren't men's colleges. And so maybe we need to go back to having men's colleges.
They've all gone.
It's sort of interesting too. Culver City is moving to policy where they're going to develop IEPs for every Black student. Because they feel like they need a boost. However, they're totally ignoring the fact that there are equal numbers of Hispanic students that are, struggling just as much, and they're not giving attention to.
And how are they going to define a Black student?
Yeah.
Well, it's one drop in this country. It's one drop. Right? Yeah.
Say something.
No, I was just going to bring out that point. It wasn't 164th, it was one drop.
One drop, yeah. Which even Hitler said, like, that's a bit extreme. Like, he did. He did, yeah.
Did you guys read Cassie, the book?
I did not care for it at all.
Okay.
But she's with boxes for next one.
Great. Pass. I didn't care for it. I didn't care for it.
Okay, I was just wondering if you spoke with this letters after. Did you all read some of that?
Positive. I felt like I felt like I told that terrible story. And just as an educated woman, right? I speak of that. Then someone. I didn't hear. I appreciated at least this gentleman's, some suggestions on potential solutions, whether we'll do them or not, whether we'll show up to polls ever and vote or show up in that. But cast. I just didn't jump on that bandwagon.
I think another factor is in the 80s, when manufacturing really took a big hit, and a lot of blue collar jobs went away. I think that really hit the African American community very badly, because that was one of the ways to get into the middle class.
Remember Detroit,
right?
right?
Motown, right?
Sure.
It went away. So that was how a lot of Black men were able to support their families. And when those jobs started to go away,
steel mills and auto,
right? And and of course that's happened now across the racial ethnic boundaries. That's one of the reasons why rural America, rural whites are in so much trouble. There's no job.
Well, I think it's almost time to wrap up, but I did want to leave with one last item. One of the quotes in this book said that the perception of a working woman seems to be accepted today, but the stay-at-home father is not.
Oh,
and I'm wondering, obviously it's a perception issue, and he has a bunch of solutions that we need to give childcare and things to men, but what is your reaction to that? Probably a good way to wrap this up.
I have a reaction.
I have a reaction.
All of my friends are having grandchildren right now, and all of their sons are taking paternity leave and staying home or staying.
I think the younger generation, you talk about what the high schoolers are, the young adults, it's changed. They are taking advantage of paternity leave. We will never economically create 6 months. 100% reimbursement for this child leave period. And that's I don't think the American economy is
well, it's
built to allow that.
Now that so many
we should be able to, but we don't have the political will to do that. But the younger generation, absolutely, because I think the wives and mothers demand it.
I can ask a question. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Does society see a house husband or a stay-at-home dad as lazy? Society
still perceived that way.
Yeah. If he's not working,
I think it's changing.
I hope so.
I think if you hold my generation or above, right? So Gen X and above, the perception is that lazy,
taking an easy way out.
There's always negative.
Mooching off his wife.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Called them the Homer go-getters. That's actually a term used in our communities. Margaret's raising her hand. Go ahead, Margaret. It's your mom.
Yes. I wish my husband was here to address that, because we shifted our careers. He was in aerospace and got laid off when our youngest was 2, or yeah, about 2, and he saw it coming. And he went to a different aerospace company and hated it. And then I was offered a full-time teaching job after being a sub in Culver City. And we decided in 24 hours we were going to do a paradigm shift. And so I became the major breadwinner for a family of 4 on a teacher's salary. And he became a freelance writer. And he did not meet a lot of stay-at-home dads when he picked up the kids or took them to the park when I was still at school. He was quite a minority in his field, but we made it work. It's just that we didn't know any other couples like us at the time, because we're talking about, see, 1994. No, it was 1997 when we made this shift. And people said, how can you make ends meet? Well, we did, and we still live in Culver City. It's possible. You just don't eat out a lot, you know, and you don't go to Disneyland. And the kids never knew that they were missing out. That was the good thing, because we had raised them not to expect designer clothes, or, you know, we'd go to the sales rack and secondhand stores and stuff like that. And they never missed out on anything.
Good for
so
you.
A lot of it is just ignoring cultural trends and starting your own trend for your own, life.
Well, and I think the fact that women, when they started going back into the workforce, the state made a big deal about how this is a lot of work and this is a job. So I think that the perceptions are changing. And I also think another silver lining from COVID, the number of people working remotely means a lot more fathers are staying home, working remotely, and so
reading their daughters' hair
at home. So hopefully it's changing. Hopefully.
Well, I never learned how to braid my daughter's hair. And they never had braided hair. Neither one of us ever figured out the hair thing.
My son braids both of his daughter's hair every morning before school, gets their barrettes in there, packs their lunch from school and does all of that, and then walks up to the 3rd floor to check into work.
Teaches them.
I have a buddy who is a stay-at-home dad. This is in the 90s in New York, 5 kids. And he was the stay-at-home dad, and I would get my football tickets from him. His dad had season tickets, and I'd meet him in Central Park, and he would be the only guy on the playground, and then I'd be waiting for him, and people would be looking at me like, who's this strange guy without kids? So exactly, right? And finally, the spring lad would come over and be like, oh, okay, he's okay. But it was interesting that his world, he was probably the only guy. He was used to it on the playground, in the supermarket. He just got used to it. And they got used to him. But it was unusual. It was clearly unusual. Yeah.
And then you bring up another point about how male child caregivers or males who teach pre-K and so on are kind of looked at in a suspicious way.
Right.
Suspiciously, where
I can't coach. Like, I would love to be a coach of youth league. I don't have children. I cannot coach now. It is unacceptable. I can vouch for you. I don't want someone to vouch for me, right? Yeah, I need to feel comfortable being around kids. I've been a camp counselor. I love being around kids. But society today, if you don't have a kid on the team, you are not going to be a coach. That just you said it's correct. That's what happens to Boy Scouts.
Also, I have to say,
we'll talk about it later.
I'll say it because most of my boys, when they were like, so we chose to not have them play on the school team because we wanted them to play with other kids in Pasadena, not just on the school team. And they were all coached by single Black men.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. No kid with no kids, right? Single Black men. There's no other kids in the. And my boys still keep in contact. He does actually have a little girl now. They're just the other day, they're like, I wonder what Rico's doing right now. My other son's like, I just hope everything's okay with him. And I hope this and that. Their bonds with them, but younger, right? Probably late 20s at the most. Because I think if you would have gotten any older than that,
they'd be suspicious. They absolutely. I get it.
Yeah.
Like, I love going to movies on my own, right? And I love the Pixar stuff. Yeah. Cannot go sit in a movie theater by myself. for a matinee without kids next to me, right? It's like,
He's all the time coming here.
I go by myself too.
yeah, right. You can't do it. You can't do it. You gotta hire a kid. Oh, exactly. Just sit next to me. Just pretend to be my kid.
Thank you for your popcorn.
I know, right. And that's more suspicious. Wasn't that the plot of a 2.5 Men episode where Charlie Sheen was pretending to be a stay-at-home dad?
Probably. There's a California law something where anyone volunteers in the youth organization, Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or whatever, where youth are involved, you have to do this online training, and you have to be minded and all of that.
Yeah.
And to have insurance.
Yeah,
That's right.
Scouts has its own youth protection
Yes.
training and policies that they've had for many, many years because of the unfortunate things that have happened. And so we have to do that like every 2 years, do that youth protection. But it's a good thing because it protects both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And it part of it is just creating, it's not just about child abuse, that it's just about creating situations, safe situations. So you're never alone. It's always two. But you could be a single adult and be a leader, but you would have to have 2 adults on any kind of outing or any situation. You're never alone with a child.
Yeah.
Did Margaret want to say one more thing there? No, I mean, you had your hand up for a minute. Okay.
Didn't want to-
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, okay, so.
Look, I wanted to say congratulations.
Nice. Thank you. No, I thought,
Thank
like
you.
I said, I heard him on NPR, and then my other friend gave me a copy of The Atlantic that had a review of the article. And I know some people have a hard time finding it because it's such a new book. But I thought it was so good. But
yeah.
So we've been talking since in 1920 or 2020, rather 1920. In 2020, we were planning in the summer to do the book The Library by Susan Orlean and go to the library and have a tour. Well, guess what? 3 years later, we're going to do it. So June 24th is the date that we are set. Oh no, I can tell that's already a bad thing.
In Iceland, horse riding.
So bad.
So
Wow.
So June 24th, those of us that aren't globetrotting. Meeting at the Central Library. We're going to do a tour of the Central Library, and then we're going to go out to lunch to discuss the book. And ALOED's going to be paying for the lunch. And so mark it down on your calendar and look for the more information.
Oh, Margaret's got a question.
Then,
What time?
Question.
What time is the tour?
The tour is 11 a.m.
Okay.
11 a.m. June 24th.
Look for an invitation, I think, coming out pretty soon.
It's likely May. The invitation will come out.
But I'll put out a save the date for the on the Facebook page and on the Google group. And I know, Margaret, you're on the Google group. If anybody isn't in my email Google group for the book group, let me know. You should have my email address.
I don't know where I'm in a Google group, but I get email.
Yes, that's the Google group.
I finally got the earplugs untangled.
I'm sorry. What?
They don't fit in my ears.
Oh,
yeah.
And they make it echo.
Okay,
when I hold them in.
well, I wanted to see if Anita, so Anita, I've got your email address here. Do you want me to put you on the list? Would you please? Okay.
Pair that
I have this.
does work.
Sure. Okay.
I just want to say one last thing. Thanks to Nancy, who's kind of the mayor domo of our book
Are you
selection.
wanting me?
Just to show you the connections and things on the back of this book, one of the blurbs is from Jonathan Haidt, who happened to be one of the people that he was a co-author of one of our previous books. So a lot of times there's a lot of interconnections and tie-in with the books that we read. And so thanks to Nancy, because she's the one that is our chair of our book discussion group.
Where did Jonathan write?
He wrote Coddling of the American Mind.
Yeah.
That's been,
Points for Kim on that one.
that was what the book we discussed during the homecoming. Or no, alumni. One of them.
Yes. Yes. So, are you on my email list and would you like to be? To get emails from me? No? Would you like to get emails from me?
Oh, do you mind how to?
I do.
Always on Saturdays.
There was an airplane going over. Can you hear?
Can you repeat that, Dick? Are you on the email list?
I'm on the email list. Yeah, thanks.
Terrific.
Okay. I think Susan is on the email list, I believe. Is that correct? Nod. Susan, are you on the email list?
Thumbs up. Yes. Okay.
Yes,
Great.
So. Okay. All right. Excellent. Thank you. So we'll hopefully see everyone on June 24th.
This was a delight.
And yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks again, KB, for the technical.
Absolutely. We're getting better at this.
Okay. All right.
Well, on June 14th, my daughter and my granddaughter